They say betrayal never comes from your enemies. I learned that the hard way at 2:08 a.m. on a Thursday morning when I opened an email that ended 6 years of my life with a single hollow line. Thanks for all your hard work, but we've hired someone with more experience. Pick up your things on Monday. No meeting, no call, not even my name in the subject line. Just that. I sat in silence, the glow of my laptop the only light in the room. I was still in the office. Of course I was. Finishing up a system audit we were rushing for investors. My boss, Adrian Mills, had gone home hours ago, as he often did, usually after asking me to lock up. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion. Then something colder. Familiar. I'd felt this before. When my father left us with no warning. Just a note on the counter that said, "Don't wait up." I read the email again. Then I smiled. Not out of amusement. Out of clarity. Because I had seen this coming. 6 years ago, we started Everest Technologies with nothing but a shared Google Doc and a pitch deck that got laughed out of a dozen rooms. We worked out of Adrian's garage. We lived on instant noodles and cold coffee. And we told each other we'd change the world. And maybe we did. At least for a while. We built a product that disrupted the logistics industry, a predictive analytics platform that shaved millions off supply chain delays. And when the $10 million Series A came through last fall, Adrian stood on stage, wearing a tailored suit I'd never seen before, and said, "This company wouldn't exist without teamwork." Teamwork. Not me. Not the system I architected. Not the 2,000 hours I poured into debugging our machine learning engine while he was off networking at Tech Mixers in Napa. And now I was being discarded, replaced by someone with more experience. The email didn't mention a name, but I knew who it was. Ryan, a smooth-talking VP from a competitor who once tried to poach me at a conference. I'd turned him down. Apparently, Adrian hadn't. I closed the laptop gently, not slamming it, not crying. I wasn't the kind of woman who made scenes. I was the kind who made plans. And I had one. Because while Adrian had been busy collecting accolades and courting investors, I had been quietly backing up everything. Not out of spite, out of habit. I documented meticulously. Every line of code I wrote, every architectural change, every strategic decision with my initials and timestamps. I had built the core infrastructure of our product, not from company resources, but on my personal workstation, in my apartment, before Everest had even existed. And I had the receipts. I walked through the dark office, past desks I'd assembled myself, chairs I'd ordered, whiteboards filled with notes in my handwriting. The fridge still had that bottle of Prosecco I'd bought to celebrate our funding round, untouched. Adrian had promised we'd open it together when the contracts were signed. He never did. As I left, I paused at the door and looked back once more. Not with regret, with resolve. They think I'll just walk away, I thought. On Monday morning, I showed up like the email said. I collected my things, a small notebook, a photo of my sister and me from college, and a potted succulent Adrian gave me on my birthday 2 years ago. I left the plant on his desk. No one said anything. A few avoided eye contact. One intern whispered, "You don't deserve this." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I walked out of the building without looking back. That afternoon, I emailed Adrian one sentence. "Good luck." He didn't respond. He wouldn't. He thought it was over. It wasn't. Because what Adrian didn't know, couldn't have known, it was that 3 weeks earlier, I'd been approached by a senior partner at a venture firm who said, "We love your tech, but we're not sold on Adrian." And now, Adrian was about to learn what it truly meant to lose the person who built the system holding his company together. The first call would come in exactly 90 days. And when it did, Adrian's voice would crack just enough for me to recognize the sound of panic. 3 days after the email, I slept in for the first time in months. No Slack notifications, number 3 a.m. alerts about server load, no urgent requests marked high priority but sent at midnight. Just silence. Thick, unsettling silence. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. I wandered around my apartment like a ghost, opening cupboards, closing them. Sitting. Standing. I'd been running on adrenaline for 6 years straight, and now the stillness felt wrong. But by the end of the week, I remembered something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. I opened my personal Git repositories. There it was. The origin story of Everest's product. The first build of the data engine, written in Python on my secondhand MacBook in a 400-square-foot studio, long before Adrian even knew what predictive logistics meant. I scrolled through timestamps, commits, versions, all predating the company incorporation, all under my name. This isn't revenge, I reminded myself. This is proof. Adrian had always been charming. Too charming. Investors loved him because he could sell a paperclip with a TED Talk smile. But charm doesn't build architecture. Charm doesn't debug a recursive loop at 4 a.m. while your hands are shaking from too much caffeine and too little sleep. That was me. Every time. He called me his secret weapon once. I should have listened to that phrasing more carefully. By week 2, the LinkedIn posts started. Adrian, all grins and platitudes, announcing Everest's strategic pivot and the hiring of Ryan Maxwell as their new CTO. No mention of me. No farewell. Not even a polite tag. Ryan's caption read, "Excited to bring my enterprise experience to help take Everest to the next level." I actually laughed. Enterprise experience? He'd spent the last 5 years jumping between consulting gigs, leaving a trail of half-finished implementations and bloated invoices. The guy couldn't architect his way out of a sandbox. I clicked out of LinkedIn and opened my inbox. Nothing from Adrian, of course. But there was a short message from Danielle, one of our back-end engineers who'd always stayed late to help me test deployments. "Just heard what happened. I'm so sorry. It's not the same without you. Ryan doesn't understand half the stack. They're patching things daily. Just wanted you to know we miss you." I replied with a single line. "Thanks for telling me. Keep your head down. And keep receipts." Week 3 was when things started to unravel. A contact from Synapse Capital, a rival investor group, reached out. "We heard about your departure. Would you be open to talking about new ventures? Also, and I hope you don't mind, someone on our tech team flagged that Everest's product performance dropped significantly since last month. We thought you might know why." I didn't answer that last part. Not yet. Instead, I scheduled a meeting. The next day, I sat across from 3 partners in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Palo Alto. I wore the same blazer I'd worn to our Series A pitch. Only this time, I wasn't backing someone else's dream. I was exploring what mine could look like. They asked me about Everest. I gave them the public version. Differences in vision, time for something new, no hard feelings. But when they pushed further, I showed them my early code base. Their expressions changed. "You built this before Everest existed?" one of them asked. I nodded. In my apartment, nights and weekends. I brought it to the company when Adrian pitched the idea. They exchanged looks. "And your employment contract? Did it include specific IP transfer clauses?" I had a lawyer review it. Standard clause. But the core engine predates any agreement, and I can prove it. One of the partners leaned back and smiled. "Well then, Ms. Foster, we think you have something very valuable." By the end of the meeting, I didn't have a new company. Not yet. But I had options. Leverage. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the ground under my feet was mine again. That night, I opened a folder on my laptop labeled Failsafe. Inside were files I'd compiled months ago. Quietly, methodically. They weren't meant to hurt anyone. They were insurance, documentation, architecture maps, security protocol drafts, back-end integration logs, all signed and dated. They proved 2 things. 1, that I had built Everest's heartbeat. 2, that without me they were running on borrowed time. And time, I knew, was almost up. 3 weeks later, exactly 90 days since the email, Adrian's name appeared on my phone. I didn't answer. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then I smiled, because I knew this was just the beginning. The first call was followed by a second, and a third, all from Adrian. Each one I ignored. It wasn't petty. It was strategic. I wanted him to sweat, to sit in the mess he'd made, fully aware that the one person who could help had already walked out that door and wasn't rushing to come back. Then came the email. Subject line, urgent, need your input. I opened it, more curious than anything. Eva, I realize things ended abruptly, and I regret how I handled that. Ryan is having a bit of trouble stabilizing the architecture for our next release. The team says you may have kept some notes or documentation that could help. Would you be open to a quick chat? We'd compensate you for your time, of course. Minus Adrian. Compensate me? For my own work? He still didn't get it. I didn't reply. But I did start watching. Everest's Twitter account was flooded with support complaints, login failures, delayed data syncing, entire dashboards going offline during peak hours. Users were tagging them with hashtags like number Everest slip and number data fail. The cracks weren't subtle anymore. Then Danielle messaged me again. This time, not on email, but Signal. Hey, just between us. Ryan tried to implement changes to your codebase and broke the whole backend. He didn't understand the data validation layers you'd built, so he bypassed them. Now nothing's syncing correctly and client reports are a mess. Adrian is losing it. I stared at her message for a while, then finally typed. Thank you for keeping me in the loop. Stay safe. Don't get caught in the fallout. Because I knew what was coming next. Sure enough, 2 days later, a message came in from Everest's head of legal. A vaguely worded request to clarify the ownership of certain components within the product infrastructure. Valerie, my attorney, flagged it before I even saw it. We met that afternoon. I think they're preparing for a legal maneuver, she said, flipping through printed screenshots of my old commits, Slack messages, and architecture drafts. But they're clumsy. They're trying to push you into a quiet resolution before they admit how bad it's gotten. And if I don't respond? I asked. They'll escalate, but that's not a bad thing. Because you're prepared, Ava. You've documented everything. And if they try to use your system without a license or transfer agreement in place, that's IP infringement. Plain and simple. I leaned back in the chair and exhaled slowly. It was finally happening. I remembered every late night Adrian dismissed my warnings. Every time he said, let's not overcomplicate things, Eva, when I suggested proper fail-safes. Every investor call where he said, we're a product-first company, while taking credit for code he couldn't even read. He had gambled on charisma, and now the bill was due. The next day, I got another email. This one from Ryan. Hi, Eva. I hope you're doing well. I'm reaching out to ask if you could shed some light on how the authentication modules integrate with the backend. We've had some hiccups, and I want to make sure we're aligned. Let me know if we can jump on a call. Happy to pay for your time. I almost laughed. Ryan, the so-called expert, was fishing for answers through polite desperation. The same guy who once told a panel that back-end infrastructure isn't that complicated if you understand business logic was now falling apart trying to untangle my code. But what really got me? Happy to pay for your time. 6 years, no recognition, no proper exit. But now, they wanted to pay me to explain a system I had warned them was never designed to be handed off casually. I didn't respond. Not to him. Instead, I asked Valerie to prepare a formal notice. We drafted a legal letter outlining the following. My original ownership of the core architecture and predictive engine. Evidence that portions of the codebase were created before my employment. Lack of any documented transfer of IP beyond what was covered in the employment contract. A request for cease and desist on use of the architecture without a licensing agreement. The letter ended with a simple line. We are open to a good faith discussion should your client wish to acknowledge the rightful ownership of proprietary systems developed by Ms. Foster. We sent it and waited. That weekend, Everest's site experienced a complete 8-hour outage. Several clients posted public statements about considering alternative vendors. And the final blow? An article on TechSignal titled, "The Everest Fall, When Startups Overlook the Brains Behind the Product." They'd interviewed anonymous insiders. They quoted messages. They mentioned my name, only as the former lead engineer who declined comment. But it was clear. The industry was waking up. Adrian's phone didn't stop ringing that week, but mine was the one they needed to answer. And I wasn't done yet. By the start of the fourth week, the silence had shifted. It wasn't quiet anymore. It was humming, low, urgent, and unmistakable, like the sound of a machine about to break under pressure. My cease and desist letter had landed like a warning shot. I hadn't expected a response overnight, but I had expected one eventually. It came in the form of a calendar invite. Subject line, Board Discussion, Strategic Review. Sender, Claire Wu, Board Member, Everest Technologies. The location? A private conference room at an investor's firm. The time? Friday at 9:30 a.m. The note? Confidential. Your attorney is welcome to attend. They weren't calling to intimidate me. Not anymore. This was different. Do we accept? I asked Valerie that evening, sitting across from her in her corner office overlooking downtown. She didn't hesitate. Absolutely, but only on our terms. They're not inviting you out of courtesy, Eva. They're inviting you because they're losing control. And they know you're holding the keys. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was anxious, but because I was ready. For years, I'd been the voice in the background, the person who built the engine but never touched the wheel. Adrian had been the face, the speaker, the one who signed the deals. But now the investors were peeling back the glossy surface and seeing the rot underneath. And they were coming to find me. The room was exactly what I expected. Too cold, too modern, and full of carefully unreadable faces. 4 board members sat on one side with their assistant near the door. Claire Wu gave me a polite nod. She'd been one of the original angel investors, sharp, analytical, and from what I'd heard, increasingly skeptical of Adrian's leadership. Adrian, of course, was there too. His usual smug confidence had curdled into something brittle. He didn't stand when I walked in, just nodded and muttered, "Eva." Valerie greeted the room smoothly, placing her briefcase on the table and retrieving a single folder, the one that contained everything. Claire began, "Thank you for coming, Ms. Foster. I know the situation has been difficult, but we felt it necessary to speak directly before any further action is taken." I nodded. Understood. Another board member, a tall man with silver-rimmed glasses, cut in. "Let's not waste time. The architecture Eva developed is central to Everest's platform. Our understanding is that portions of it predate her employment and may not have been formally transferred." Adrian cleared his throat. "I disagree with that characterization. We built this company together. Everything developed during her time here belongs to Everest." Valerie slid the folder forward. "We anticipated that argument. Inside, you'll find timestamps, Git logs, local repository evidence, and dated screenshots of Eva's original prototype. All from weeks, in some cases months, before any contract was signed. Additionally, there are Slack messages between Mr. Mills and Ms. Foster where he acknowledges her prior work." Claire flipped through the pages. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned a highlighted exchange. She looked up at Adrian. "Did you know this wasn't formally transferred?" Adrian's jaw tensed. I assumed... That's the problem. Claire interrupted sharply. "You assumed." The room was quiet. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Valerie leaned forward. "We're not here to dismantle Everest. Eva believes in the product she helped build. But she won't allow her work to be misrepresented or misused. We're prepared to negotiate a licensing agreement. And more importantly, correct the narrative." Another board member looked at me. "What are you asking for, Ms. Foster?" My voice was calm, even. Acknowledgement, licensing fees, and a public correction. I want it clear that the system's foundation was my creation, not a vague team effort or someone else's afterthought. "And if we agree," Claire asked, Then you get what you need: documentation, support, and the opportunity to stabilize the platform before more clients walk. And if we don't? I didn't smile. I just met her eyes. Then I file for IIP infringement and take the matter public. And I think you know what that does to a $10 million valuation. Claire sat back in her chair and exhaled slowly. Understood. Adrian stood abruptly. This is extortion. No, I said quietly. This is accountability. Something you never thought would find you. He looked around the table, waiting for someone to back him. No one did. As Valerie and I walked out of the room, she leaned toward me and whispered, "You just flipped the entire table." I didn't reply, but deep down I knew. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about rewriting the story before someone else erased me from it completely. And they were about to learn just how much power they had handed away. The boardroom meeting had shifted something. Not just for them. For me. For the first time, I wasn't just defending what I'd built. I was owning it. Reclaiming it. The morning after the meeting, Claire Wu called. Directly. No assistant, no calendar invite. Just her voice. Calm, but urgent. "Ava," she said, "we reviewed everything last night. The documentation is indisputable. Frankly, we're stunned it took this long to come to light." "I'm not," I replied. She sighed. "Fair. The board met again this morning. Adrian doesn't know yet, but a vote has been scheduled for early next week to decide on a leadership restructure." I paused. "Are you saying they're removing him?" "I'm saying," Claire said carefully, "that some leaders build and some just benefit. And we've decided it's time to stop confusing the two." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Before she hung up, she added, "We'll be in touch soon. And Eva, thank you for finally forcing us to see the truth." That weekend, I took a walk by the marina, something I hadn't done in years. Not since the first month of Everest, when Adrian and I used to take breaks from coding by watching sailboats drift by and dreaming about acquisition offers. We hadn't built a company back then, just promises. Somewhere along the way, I kept building while he started selling an illusion. The sky was clear, but a storm was brewing, not in the clouds, but in the inboxes of everyone still inside Everest. By Monday, Valerie had finalized the licensing terms. They were fair. Even generous. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition and the assurance that my work could never again be used without consent. Clean. Legal. Binding. We sent the proposal to the board at 9 a.m. At 11:30 a.m., Adrian called me for the first time in weeks. This time, I answered. "Eva," he began, the edge of false charm already grating. "I think we've let things go too far. There's no need for all this hostility." "It's not hostility," I said evenly. "It's structure. Something you always undervalued." "I didn't mean for things to end the way they did," he said, shifting tones. "But you have to understand. Investors expect leadership to make hard decisions. Bringing in Ryan seemed like the right call at the time." I let the silence stretch just long enough for it to sting. Then I said, "You fired me by email." He exhaled. "That was a mistake." "No," I replied. "It was a decision. And now you're watching the consequences of that decision unfold." There was a pause. Then he said, "They're voting, aren't they?" I didn't confirm. I didn't need to. The silence was confirmation enough. "You're replacing me." I leaned back in my chair. "You replaced me first." Another long silence. "I never thought you'd do this," he finally said. "I know," I said. "That was your biggest mistake." On Wednesday morning, the board vote was finalized. Adrian was out, officially removed from the CEO position by unanimous decision. Claire called me herself. "The board would like to offer you the CTO role with a revised equity package, oversight on all technical hires, and full public credit for your work. We've also approved the licensing agreement. You'll receive royalties on all revenue linked to the predictive engine and data platform you created." It wasn't just a job offer. It was justice. I'll need to think about it, I said, and for the first time, I meant it. Because I had options now, not just with Everest, but beyond. 3 firms had reached out over the past month. 2 were startups looking for technical co-founders. The third was a multinational offering a 7-figure package to lead a division of their innovation lab. 6 months ago, I would have taken a fraction of that just to be recognized. But now I was in control. That afternoon, TechSignal released a follow-up article. The Woman Behind the Code, How Eva Foster Rescued a Sinking Startup She Helped Build. They'd gotten quotes from board members, even Danielle. No mention of Adrian except in past tense. No mention of Ryan at all. Just one clear story. The real architect had returned, not as a savior, but as the rightful leader. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The company was stabilizing. The truth was public. The power dynamics had reversed. And for the first time in 6 years, I wasn't waiting for someone else to tell my story. I was writing it myself. 3 months after the vote, I stood in the Everest auditorium, staring out at a sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces. Engineers, analysts, operations, interns. Some of them had been here since the beginning. Others were new hires brought in during the chaos. All of them had questions. All of them were watching me now. I took a breath. Not because I was nervous. I wasn't. I was grounded, clear. And this time, I wasn't here to clean up someone else's mess. I was here to lead. A lot has changed, I began. Some of it fast, some of it long overdue. But if there's one thing I want to leave you with today, it's this. The systems we build aren't just made of code and servers. They're made of people, vision, trust. And if we lose that, if we sacrifice those things to chase growth or hide flaws, we lose everything. Silence followed. The kind that settles when people are really listening. I continued. This company started with an idea, but it survived because of effort. Often invisible effort, from people who don't always get the credit. I know that feeling. Many of you do. So from this moment forward, we're rewriting how we acknowledge contribution, starting with transparency and ending with shared success. Scattered applause turned into something louder, more genuine. For once, I wasn't in the background. After the announcement, Claire approached me backstage. Her expression was different now. Not polite, but warm. We've had several clients reach out, she said. They're impressed by the stability, but more than that, they're impressed by the leadership shift. You've restored their confidence. Stability starts from the foundation, I said. And the foundation was always solid. It was just buried under branding and ego. Claire chuckled softly. Well, ego left the building with Adrian. I didn't ask about him. I already knew. He'd tried to launch a new startup a few weeks earlier, but the moment potential investors caught wind of what had happened at Everest, the lawsuits narrowly avoided, the article in TechSignal, the board removal, the funding vanished. A few bridges burned themselves. The last I heard, Ryan had moved on, quietly. No press release, no LinkedIn post, just gone. And me? I had decisions to make. The board had confirmed my CTO position, but I was given full flexibility. Consult, lead, or exit on my terms. The licensing agreement continued to generate royalties, and I had equity again, this time properly documented and unarguable. Danielle had been promoted to engineering manager. She now oversaw the back-end team. Her first act? Implementing a mentorship program for junior developers. I smiled when I heard that. One morning, about a month later, I received an email. No subject line, no sender I recognized. I opened it cautiously. Ava, I owe you an apology. I should have seen your value before it was too late. The truth is, I was afraid of being eclipsed by you. And I was. You built the core. You held it together. I didn't realize that until it all fell apart without you. I hope someday you can believe that I truly regret what I did. Adrian. I stared at the words for a while. Not with anger, not even satisfaction. just stillness. He was right, and in a way, I was grateful. Not for the betrayal, but for the clarity it gave me. I didn't reply. Some apologies are meant to be read, not returned. That weekend, I visited the same cafe where I used to go during the early days of Everest, back when all I had was a laptop, an idea, and a dream no one believed in except me. I brought my notebook this time. Not the digital kind, the real one. Paper, pen, margins filled with tiny notes. And I started sketching something new. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. Because now I was no longer building to prove something to someone else. I was building for me. And as the sun dipped behind the San Francisco skyline, I realized that what I had fought for all these months wasn't just recognition. It was ownership. Of my time, my talent, my story. Because the legacy you leave isn't the company name stamped on a product. It's the values you build into it. And no one, not even the CEO who tried to erase me, could take that away.